Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for that great introduction, Sean. My name is Jim St.Clair, and it's a pleasure to be able to present with you on the topics of open source digital health interoperability and what we're doing at the Interoperability Institute to work with organizations and collaborate to advance them. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've put together as something called the Interop community and the MELD platform, which is an open source sandbox and ecosystem. Excuse me. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about digital public goods and the UN concept of digital public goods and how we think that fits into open source digital health, and then talk a bit about standing up different technology resources to support interoperability and what we're doing in what we now call virtual innovation center challenge events. So some of the takeaways from this are going to be the best practices and benefits of having open source simulation platforms for stakeholders, demonstrating business process modeling standards, and illustrate reference implementations as data standards for interoperability. I thought it was important for this audience, especially internationally and in the Asia region, to talk a bit about what a digital public good is. And digital public goods are open source software, open data, open infrastructure models, and content that are designed to adhere to the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Digital sovereignty is another important point. I know this is important in Asia, helping countries maintain control over their decision-making and implementing of services within their sovereign boundaries and their sovereign citizens. Proprietary technologies that lead to lock-in and silos oftentimes threaten that digital sovereignty. And so we promote the concepts of open source solutions and digital public goods as a way to develop new patterns for cooperation and interoperability. So why should we care about this concept of digital public goods and what's some of the underpinning? You know, when you think about your bridges, your highway, your roads, your water infrastructure, those are all public goods. Those are things that are paid for by the citizens' investments in the government. They're used by citizens and provided and maintained by the state as a service that all citizens can take advantage of. So a colleague of mine who's the product manager for the Digital Public Goods Alliance noted in a presentation, shouldn't crucial services provided to citizens be built on open source? And as we move obviously more and more into the 21st century, and specifically in e-health and digital health and health IT, you know, there are infrastructures that you are now using and everyone using as citizens for services in healthcare that really should be or be considered digital public goods for the sake of sharing information and improving population health and public health overall. So digital public goods as a concept was really solidified back in 2018, where there was an idea that digital public goods would be something that the UN, the World Health Organization, and others would really invest time into. They would advance the development goals of the UN. It would be open source based, and of course, just like the principles of healthcare itself, should do no harm, and they should help reinforce privacy, security, other applicable laws and best practices. Whether these were digital public goods that were specific to healthcare or other industries where digital public goods could be applicable. So you can find the digital public goods standards available at the DPGA website. These are the main components for what are to be considered digital public goods, and there are evaluation criteria for digital public goods. There are a number of open source digital health projects that fall within digital public goods, and we are trying to advance the interoperability, development, and collaboration around the concepts of open source and digital public goods that helps meet all of these various requirements. So what are some of the key things that make a digital public good a successful innovation and help advance in the marketplace? Well, first of all, of course, open source software license, ability to access the product on GitHub and have it available, a community, a consensus-driven community that's maintaining the life cycle of that software product, preferably driven by a global community, and try and get as many participants and collaborators as possible, built around a common issue like health data exchange or clinical data repositories, as an example, and built to standards. Within healthcare, of course, not only do you have ISO standards, but there are the standards of HL7, FHIR, CCDA, other standards that are used for health data and health documentation, and those all should be reflected in the mechanism and the software that you're building. So there is an associated maturity model as well. Excuse me, as well for digital public goods. And these are the three major underpinnings around making sure it's a global utility, community, and software. And then depending on the degree to which all of these bullets have been developed and fostered and have proper documentation, there's maturity that goes along with each of them, with the goal that any software project really reaches the peak capabilities and maturity that's possible to advance it, which means extensive cooperation, lots of collaboration and contributions from the community, actually using the software and providing feedback into various ways to improve it, etc. So as I mentioned, one of the things we did at the at the Interoperability Institute was to build a collaboration called the Interop Community, which is a emerging collaboration to advance healthcare interoperability via open source platforms and open source software and digital public goods. There's been some changes to these slides, but these are some of the preliminary organizations that have first joined and participate. It is free to join. It is a collaborative environment. And we're in the process of continuing to develop participation, collaboration amongst the members as we grow. And then support the ability to do this development, we have what we call the MELD open source sandbox. As you can see, it provides an open source environment to allow you to build upon your health IT interoperability excuse me, and development requirements. It is no cost to participate, and we have various levels of participation. You can use it to build communities of practice and bring groups together to work on common software development requirements. We do provide the framework for data integration with things like Happy Fire servers available in storage. And it is all available online and easy to sign up for an account to leverage it for being able to test software that you already have or test software that may be being in development. So this just lays out some of the different ways that users can use MELD. We have about, I think it's around 692 users from various parts of the US and elsewhere that have free MELD accounts that participate in the MELD sandbox. You can also download it from GitLab and use it as you need. We support various HL7 activities and hackathons and connectathons to provide MELD and MELD environments to demonstrate data exchange and adherence with the implementation guides at the connectathon testing. We also have partnerships with universities and other institutes of higher learning, where again we demonstrate that or provide skill building for students to learn how to use the various HL7 standards. And you can also build communities of practice around specific software purposes or demonstration purposes and invite people to the community. But it's important to note that technology just by itself does not reduce disparities. And I'm sure in the Asian community, just like we focus on in the US, the concepts of like the common data standards, increasing interoperability and accessibility of health devices is all intended to be able to try and expand the access to healthcare and for underserved populations to receive healthcare, hopefully better through data interoperability, through the availability of health information. And you can see from some of the points on the slide that we've noted in particular, COVID-19 highlighted a lot of these problems and the lack of accessibility for the internet, lack of accessibility for mobile services in mHealth, and the ability for those individuals to get access to their information to be able to use it for their healthcare decision-making and for treatments. Recognizing this and recognizing that a lot of these open source development opportunities translate into use cases and specific areas that we want to examine where there may be a challenge for being able to provide IT services or provide healthcare information. We're working in partnership with AWS, who's our infrastructure provider, to offer what we now call virtual innovation centers. The Virtual Innovation Center pulls together challenge events which are hosted by a specific community of sponsors, stakeholders, and participants to focus on one or more specific work streams where we feel there's a challenge that needs to be addressed. And this isn't just connecting one IT system to another IT system or demonstrating health interoperability or the use of a fire implementation guide. These are larger thematic topics, such as things like electronic consent or digital quality measures that require multiple stakeholders, have one or more governance frameworks, and need to demonstrate several things over the course of a period of time of our challenge event to be able to benefit the stakeholders in advancing new ways to improve interoperability, address inequality, and deliver better digital health services overall. Some of the benefits for putting together this event that are different than just simply participating in the MELD sandbox. We have common, repeatable, proven processes in partnership with AWS that talk about the working backwards methodology, how you work through business process mapping and business process decomposition to say, okay, if we think that, that the topic of consent to share mental health data is a problem, what are the components that go into how mental health data is collected, who the recipients are, how that information moves around, how do we consider consent? And all of those have various business processes or information workflows. So we break those down together and decide what areas here need to be improved and what do the stakeholders and the participants think can be developed for advancement. It gives a clearer understanding of the problems and the desired outcomes. It maximizes an opportunity for everyone to have a voice at the table to be able to discuss what could be a better solution, or are there solutions that are only partially developed and could be built upon to develop new capabilities. It can also potentially leverage faster adoption because now instead of one or two or three organizations participating in new ideas and solutions, you've brought together a group of both the stakeholders and the participants and sponsors to be able to decide what to do. If you develop these things and they offer an opportunity to be a digital public good on their own, this could improve broader adoption. It can reduce lifecycle management costs because, like other open source digital public goods, you have collaborative groups driven by consensus to develop something. It's not just one team of developers at one company and another team of developers someplace else. They're working together collaboratively to advance solutions that potentially the whole industry could adopt. Which saves a lot of individual time participation in being required to do this. They're also easily scalable. They could involve one or more events over time where perhaps you set out to develop a solution or have clearer understandings of problems in one phase. Those carry over to another set of stakeholders and another set of participants in a second phase. And be able to build upon those to develop one or more things as part of those various work streams and what those themes are. And at the end of the day, of course, we hope to drive those standards adoption. As noted when talking about digital public goods, adopting and utilizing international standards is a key part of digital public goods maturity. And we hope to be able to advance that with HL7 and other international standards as required. As I mentioned, they follow a repeatable process. We work collaboratively with potential participants and stakeholders to identify and define the problem. We bring those stakeholders together and begin laying on a schedule and a project. We work through the working backwards session to actually define and make sure we understand what is a future state or a to-be state that we envision, and what are the specific key components of what we need to work on to get to that envisioned future state. From there, the participants and stakeholders together work to build and demo potential solutions in various events. And then we have a solution evaluation opportunity at the end, where perhaps it either yields a new digital public good or new concepts for standards that could be utilized, or new benefits to the stakeholders and the participants that hadn't been previously envisioned. So why we think we're well positioned for this is because we have made this commitment to be involved with open source and providing the MELD sandbox. We partner with a wide range of other companies and technology providers in the US and elsewhere to be able to deliver these various challenge events and open source capabilities. The innovation space is constantly growing, and we try to provide a standard internationally neutral legal framework to be able to participate. And it also offers a marketplace. So if these various solutions that are developed out of challenge events may yield industry potential, we can assist you with providing an environment where that could be hosted as you develop something as a software developer or an industry participant. This is a bit of a busy slide, but it just kind of breaks down what I talked about before about the various components that we have in the architecture for MELD and that we do use to be able to support advancing the various challenge events, whether it's in fire servers, synthetic data, which is very important and have to talk about separately, tools for data visualization, and then from an operations standpoint, the tools for collaboration for web portal and participation, mailing lists, developing advisory boards, et cetera. So as I mentioned, we have a number of things that we're looking at as areas specifically within the US, but also applicable elsewhere on digital quality measures, implementing consent, AI model governance, what we call social determinants of health or social drivers of health, that all have the groundwork for these challenge events to work on major themes and major areas of exploration that could potentially yield new business processes and new ways to be able to exchange information. And it is growing pretty quickly in terms of both requirements here and on a global basis as various new initiatives come up for exchanging and using healthcare data. We call it kind of a roadmap and a plan for success. As I mentioned, there are various initiatives in the U.S. nationally for technology advancements. I believe that you had presenters from ONC talk about concepts like TEFCA, the exchange framework and common agreement, the concept of qualified health information networks, the adoption of US CDI. Those all lay the groundwork for various forms of advancements and innovation that we can translate into community-driven challenge events for those various solutions. And as I mentioned, it may be one simple event that yields the results or the outcomes the stakeholders are looking for. But preferably, we want to lay the groundwork with one challenge event to be able to support then second and third challenge events to really flesh out and develop all the aspects of various business process and transformation and how health IT and health data is incorporated into that. So we may have one group of stakeholders for one event that evolves into a second group of stakeholders for another, and then yields the results that get translated into a third event for being able to truly solve some area of national advancement and innovation that we're interested in. All right, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to take any questions and discuss further. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Yes, thank you for introducing your work at the Interoperability Institute and MELD to the AeHIN community, Sir Jim. So now we'll open the floor for questions or maybe comments or reactions. I think this would be a big interest to our members, especially those from the Interoperability Labs. I think Dr. Alvin has something to say.
Hi, Alvin. How are you, sir?
Good evening. Thank you for telling us more about MELD and the Interoperability Institute. Last July 23, I don't know if you're able to join that webinar. We had a presentation on 10 interoperability labs that have been set up in 10 different countries since we started the call in AeHIN way back in 2018. In our general meeting in Colombo, October 2018, we introduced the concept of an interoperability lab as a physical structure and a set of capable people within the country to help the country move forward with their interoperability aspirations. And since then, several countries have approached AeHIN and asked support. And we don't actually have any resources to provide to them except to connect them to the other interoperability labs and exchange knowledge and resources. And it appears that you are, in a way, an interoperability lab on your own. So we would like to invite you to join the network of interoperability labs, share your knowledge, your expertise, and also some of the things that you learn as you implement your protocols and the frameworks that you've mentioned. What has been the challenges with your own interoperability connectathons and interopathons, building communities? We've been building the AeHIN community since 2012, and we've seen what works and what does not work. And from there, we developed a lot of tools and mechanisms like convergence workshops, connectathons, but they're not really connectathons in the way IHE would do a connectathon. It's more like
Yes.
bringing people together and just agreeing what is a common problem and how do we what would be a common use case and how do we put our heads together and solve that problem, which you can't finish in a 2-day event. But it builds community. It builds it brings people together, looking at the same direction and agreeing that yes, we're all in the same boat. We want to go towards the same direction, and we should put our respective resources on the table to solve the problem together. And I think that's really the maybe it's a solution-a-thon rather than a connect-a-thon.
Right.
And so maybe you can just share some stories about how MELD has brought together people and what solutions, or no matter how small they may be, but this might be small sparks of brilliance that we can already share with the people in the audience. Over. Thank you.
Sure. And Alvin, I would comment by saying I think that all innovation centers have some similar challenges around the globe, which is that it takes resources. So you can be able to pull together the resources as we do for the challenge events to demonstrate a solution that helps address a common problem. That problem might be specific to one part of the healthcare industry. It may be something that's a nationwide problem. It may have global applicability. You could bring together a group specific to Asia or specific to the global South to be able to address some common problems there. But at the end of the day, it takes resources to implement what that solution is. I think when it comes to digital public goods in general, the work you've seen at innovation centers, our work, the scariest thing is to have shelfware. You hate to have organizations work together to collaborate on a common goal and develop something that could be used in a hackathon, interoperathon, that could be adopted and incorporated into their systems, and then just have it basically not get adopted because the next step for the resources necessary to use it aren't brought to bear. So we've been very pleased with the number of participants we've had in the MELD sandbox and their ability to bring things that they want to demonstrate or test with the environment we provide. We've had numerous partnerships with universities and academic organizations to be able to either provide training or education or to do demonstrations. As I mentioned, we participate regularly with a lot of the HL7 Connectathons. But those all, they yield results in the ways of new demonstrations or new validations. Someone else beyond the Innovation Center organization has to pick those up and incorporate them or use them. And I think that we are looking to be able to, we look forward to be able to participating in more testing and validation because that shows that things are being adopted and used. And beyond that, it's just a matter of, what core components can we develop together? How can we collaborate that lay key pieces that may take some time before they do get adopted and used in the industry? But every journey of 1,000 miles started with a single step. So let's just pull things together and start documenting where there's areas to innovate and then lay the framework for being able to build upon that.
Thanks, Jim. Before I ask Cha to start reading the questions, wanted to share that, and I'm not authoritative to talk about it because I just heard from the July 23 webinar an update from the Ministry of Health Indonesia how they did real world interoperability by using the Fire IPS for the Hajj.
Yep.
And I think we have some Indonesians in the call, but not from the DTO. So we'll probably invite them because we all want our innovation centers to become production level interoperability solutions. And they were able to do it with, just very clear leadership, using a very simple standard, and making sure that they do it in a controlled and secure way. So we hope to feature the Interoperability Lab in Indonesia, which is under the Digital Transformation Office of Pak Setiaji, sometime soon, together with the Malaysian Interoperability Lab with Dr. Azrin. And of course, if we can invite the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, then that would be a good next session for us. But I'll pass the floor now to chat to read the questions from Dr. Aminul. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Alvin.
Thank you, Dr. Alvin and Sir Jim. Let me read the first question in our chat box. It's from Dr. Shamil Nizamov. Is there a realistic CDS system emulator or sandbox available to test CDS hooks implementation other than the sandbox from CDS itself, which is pretty primitive?
I think so. I think one of the components we have in there is a clinical decision support system emulator, but I'm not certain. I would love to follow up offline and examine, specifically what you want to be able to emulate and test, and make sure we have something like that, and consider what we may be able to put in place there, because we try and identify things where there are new emulators or new sandbox capabilities that benefit not only one party but could be great for the broader ecosystem. So let's follow up together and talk about what your specific needs are, and see if there's something we have there or something we could propose.
Thank you, Sir Jim. Our next question is from Dr. Aminul Islam. Does the Interoperability Institute offer any certification?
A great question. No, we don't offer certification because at the moment, the intent is for everyone to come in the sandbox environment, test what they have specifically. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't or that you couldn't use the sandbox to demonstrate or test some capability for interoperability that meets a certification requirement, either for information exchange or some security or protocol. And you can leverage that to demonstrate it. When we support the HL7 Connectathons, for instance, the intent there isn't to be a certification, but to demonstrate that some system and its configuration meets the requirements of the IG, can demonstrate information workflows that the implementation guide requires. And so not a certification per se, but it can support certification programs if desired.
Thank you, Cha. We have quite a few more minutes, Jim, while the other participants are thinking of their question. Also, one of the challenges we saw, at least in the Philippines, would be agreeing on a use case. Because if there's no use case, sometimes it's quite chaotic. I don't know if you can resonate with this observation that if there's no use case, it's hard to bring people together and focus their minds towards, like, okay, we're using fire and we're using SNOMED, but what are we using them for?
Right.
And setting the use case or a common shared problem is really the first step towards the common shared solution. And this is where we find the challenges that the countries will have different starting points, so to speak. They might have common issues like immunization, nutrition, but sometimes they diverge. Like in some countries, tuberculosis will be the priority, while in some it will be maternal care. But we all know all of them connect later on. At some point they all end up in the same fire repository. It might be the mothers first, and then later on when they give birth, it will now be the children, and then the children will undergo immunization, so forth and so on. It's good that we were able to agree on the fire R4 standard in the Philippines, that it would be the specifications for the National Health Data Repository. Getting the use case is always a challenge. And I think this is where the IPS for Hajj really did well, because they basically just identified to be able to exchange simple data like the IPS for people traveling to the Mecca. And I think because of that very simple statement, together with the power of government behind that objective, really brought people to a level of confidence that this is worth our time, that this will actually work because the tools are already there, the framework is simple enough, and we have the sort of, so to speak, the blessing of the authorities to really make this happen. I was thinking that should we be doing connectathons without government? And should we be uh, uh, not that I'm putting too much power on government, but that they can really create a conducive environment to a sustainable exchange if they could just specify very clearly that this is what we are willing to support you with. And we have a mix of people in the audience right now. Most of us are academics and NGOs, but we also have people from ministries of health in the call. They might not be the prime minister, they might not be the secretary or the minister of health, but they are in the ministry of health, and they can be uh, levers of influence later on within their organization. What have been the use cases that you've used in your previous connectathons or interopathons?
Sure, great question. A lot of our HL7 Connectathon work now is, of course, around specific implementation guide. Most recently, we've participated with Helios, which is the fire accelerator that does public health reporting and some other functions. So from a use case, it's a public health reporting. From there, we're looking at potential challenge events for public health reporting where, building upon what came from the Connectathon, what are other sources of information for public health that we want to report? What are some of the mechanisms for case reporting to consider? And it doesn't specifically have to be COVID. I think, kind of to your point, it's what are new architectures or frameworks or concepts for interoperability that share data that benefit a bunch of stakeholders, and it could be reporting on maternal health as a great example that you mentioned, and maternal health cases. I think to kind of add to your comments, it's great to have use cases with lots of stakeholders. It's also great to find ways, I think, that use cases have similarities amongst them around information sharing, so that a solution like an IPS, International Patient Summary, may fit more than one use cases. I don't think you want to create a situation where we've identified 5 very important use cases that we're concerned with, that the Ministry of Health is concerned with, that industry is concerned with, and all 5, all 5 require different architectures. That's very challenging from a resource standpoint. I think in working on these use cases and bringing stakeholders together, define the similarities and the parallels to maximize not only interoperability but reusability and standard interoperability and architecture to do things that maximizes efficient use of resources while at the same time addressing as many use cases as possible.
Jim, well, Jai has a question. Go ahead, Jai.
Yeah, thanks, Alvin. Jim, this is Jay from AeHIN.
Hi, Jay.
Have a couple of questions. Jim. One is because a majority of the people also will be interested in knowing how countries can be supported. Is there a possibility that countries can approach the Interoperability Institute, or is there a history that any of the countries, from the government side, the MOH has worked with the Interoperability Institute? I can see a whole set of solutions, services available as part of the Interoperability Institute, but has that been a history whether a government or a country come forward, work together, and then is there a way how you could support? And I can also see there is a free tier available, but then there are also paid ones. So what exactly is the business model for the IOL? Thank you.
Sure, great question, Jai. And we have certainly worked with projects collaboratively with U.S.-based government activities. State of Michigan, for instance, where we're based, we've done some work with projects there. Some other governments, because we're on a nonprofit and it's a open environment. Anyone is able to sign up for accounts to start with. And then you mentioned interoperability, the interoperability IOL accounts. What I didn't touch upon here was that we have had a number of organizations ask for what I'd call custom or bespoke environments where they and a limited number of participants want to test something within the confines of their own area that's not strictly part of the open source MELD sandbox environment, and we can provide them paid tiers of support as well. There may be capabilities or services that we offer that help support what they're trying to do specifically, so we develop a custom relationship and support tier for those organizations. And then as far as other governments, most of our focus has been with the US. We have certainly participated collaboratively in other events with other governments, but always happy to consider, since we are, open nonprofit institution, if there are specific needs from a certain government ministry that we could help them collaborate on and provide them the platform, be happy to examine that.
Thank you, Jim. One connected question is like, if any one of the governments would like to set up a sandbox environment within the country, like many of them have already set up. Singapore has done, Malaysia has done, India has done, and Indonesia has done. So similarly, like anybody would like to set up their own environment, is there a possibility to take the support from the Interoperability Institute?
Yes, I believe so, and especially since we're talking about open source development type environments, we have no production level protected health information. You're not allowed to contribute anything in the way of live patient data, protected health information. We use and can generate synthetic patient data as part of those interoperability demonstrations, and can support synthetic patient data for any of your interoperability needs. That is all open and synthetic. So being able to create an environment that supports you with those demonstration needs are just fine. Which also means we don't necessarily have to worry about specific data sovereignty requirements for your health data, et cetera. It's intended to be open and not intended to house any live production health data in that regard. And so that makes it a lot easier for different organizations to access.
Thank you, Jim. This is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, you mentioned about the magic phrase, public health reporting, with the Helios project in the HL7 Connectathon. This was a common topic that has been emerging in the community of interoperability labs. Like, okay, so we now have the data in a FHIR repository. How do you get that data out in a consistent way that different stakeholders can understand? Of course, there would be the hardcore people who know SQL, but not necessarily know how to do queries with FHIR. Then there would be the program people who do not know SQL but know the interpretive capabilities of the data, and therefore they probably would need dashboards that they can slice and dice. What do you recommend amongst all the public health reporting frameworks that you've encountered would be a first good cut for Asian countries? Like, we're very different from the US. We're just starting out. We don't have legacy systems. What might be a good 1, 2, 3 things that we should look out for when it comes to public health reporting from a FHIR repository?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alvin. And I've got to be upfront. I am not an adequate expert on public health reporting and the mechanisms in that regard to necessarily have a framework to recommend. I will say that I would recommend everyone take a hard look at the HL7 repository, the HL7 website around the work that has been done in Helios on query and reporting and some of those frameworks. I think that's a great way. And I think you made a great point. Obviously in the US, we have public health reporting requirements that vary, amongst the states at a national level, the relationship between state public health agencies and the CDC. Those all implement different forms of public health reporting for different cases. And so the work of HL7 and Helios specifically is trying to address more standardized ways to do that. But it's probably a good opportunity to say, hey, if it involves the IPS or some other public health reporting for unique needs for Asian ministries, is there new opportunities for development in the Helios community that we haven't had folks participate in yet?
And so we have actually universities in the call, Jim. I'm sure you're open to universities chiming into the interop community. And so how can a So anyone in the audience right now, how can they tap into the interop community that we've started over there?
Sure, we have quite a
Yeah.
few of our current sandbox participants, the MELD participants, are universities, and like I said, they're using them for training opportunities, for education around HL7, and then to work on various projects and research grants. So MELD is open for any university to potentially participate. And if there was a desire amongst universities to look at, for instance, our introduction to fire training or using synthetic data with some of their research projects, we'd be happy to support that.
Great, great. Thank you. You'll take care of all of the instances, all the virtual
Sure,
machines?
absolutely. As long as you reach out to me, I'm happy to follow up with everyone. So
Okay.
I think my email is provided as part of this. I can throw my WhatsApp in the chat if that's helpful as well. People want to reach out to me directly. So
Thank you, Jim. Chat, are there any more questions? If not, we can have our group picture.
Yes, so far there are no new questions, Dr. Alvin, so maybe we can
Okay,
proceed.
so maybe we can have our group picture for people who are willing to join the documentation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good night.
thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.